Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
Sam Darnold is Super Bowl bound. Football fans argue about the weather, and college basketball proves you don't need to wait until March for a case of madness. It's all straight ahead on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, yo, welcome in, off and running, a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports, episode number 72 already. Lots to get into on the podcast today. Super Bowl 60 is now set. We will get into that and all the football from this past weekend, conference championship weekend. There was a story that kind of divided football fans over the weekend in regard to that AFC title game and the elements that it was played in. And we'll also touch on some college basketball because I don't know what other way to say it. College basketball has completely lost its mind. But before we get to any of that, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're taking the podcast in on. Like, rate, share the episode, but most importantly, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second, and it's absolutely free. All right, let's get into the football because Super Bowl 60 is now set. We've got the Patriots and we've got the Seahawks. Does saying Super Bowl 60 make anybody else feel old? I mean, I remember Super Bowl 20. Some people remember even before that. Super Bowl 60, oh my goodness. But look, we said going into the playoffs, this was going to be a wide open playoffs. Really didn't turn out that way. We got the 1 seed from the NFC. We got the 2 seed from the AFC. So it kind of played out that way. But if you go back to before the season, Patriots, Seahawks, that would have been a pretty unlikely Super Bowl. And you've got the Patriots angle that they're back after their short rebuild. And then you got the story of the Super Bowl, at least going in. And that is the story of Sam Darnold. Because, look, every year, those 2 weeks, you get basically every story you can possibly find about both teams, both coaches, both organizations, both owners. But to me, every once in a while, you get a story it's not just about sports, it's about the human side of things. And that is the Sam Darnold story this year. Because if you would have told basically anybody 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Sam Darnold was going to be guiding a team to the Super Bowl as the starting quarterback, not as a backup, but as their starting quarterback, everyone would have laughed in your face. And Sam Darnold is now going to the Super Bowl, and he's not going there as a backup or as a guy who, played a couple of games in relief or as a game manager. He is going there as the starting quarterback of not just the Seahawks, the team that is favored to win Super Bowl 60. And on Sunday against the Rams, he was absolutely incredible. I doubted him going in. No more doubts from me, not more doubts from anybody. He was everything you would want him to be. He was poised, he was accurate, he was commanding things. He was tough at times. He made big throws in big spots. So he's done everything. He was everything that he was supposed to be coming out of college. And look, this is not just one of the best comeback stories in football, right? This is a human story, right? Because what the Sam Darnold story really says and why I think it resonates and will resonate with the Super Bowl crowd, right? Like a lot of people who watch the Super Bowl, they don't watch games every single week. It's because the Sam Darnold story is about a guy who failed, right? Like he didn't just struggle. He failed publicly, spectacularly, on a big stage after being the 3rd pick in the draft for a New York football team. And he was not one of those guys who really faded from the spot. It wasn't like, oh, whatever happened to Sam Darnold? No, we've been watching him. And when he failed so spectacularly, he was mocked. Right? Like we all saw the clips on national TV in prime time talking about I'm seeing ghosts. That clip of him on the sidelines in that game against the Patriots, seeing ghosts, that clip followed him. And for a while there, it defined him. That was the first thing I think people would think about when you brought up the name Sam Darnold. He stopped being a quarterback and he kind of became a meme. And in today's sports culture, with social media, you generally don't overcome that. You get that dealt to you, you're usually done. So I think what makes this story powerful is it shows that even guys who are highly thought of come into the league, can struggle, can fail, can be embarrassed on a public stage like that, and you can still succeed in the long run. Because Sam Darnold, what he has been able to do last year with Minnesota, but really more so this year with the Seahawks, that is not just a sports story, that is a life lesson. And it's why people, I think, that don't even like football will be rooting for Sam Darnold. How can you not? He seems like one of the most likable athletes that there are, and it just shows you Jet fans who have a right to be bitter with him having success after he left, and Jet fans are generally kind of cynical and miserable. They're even rooting for Sam Darnold. So, and look, we'll get into some of that hypocrisy in a second, but the Sam Darnold story, I think, is the latest and maybe the greatest example. Maybe this one will finally make it break through that quarterbacks, that is not a pass-fail proposition, right? Like when we get to the draft this year or the draft every year, we'll talk about quarterbacks, and people make it out like they come into the league like they're finished products, like their greatness is undeniable, when in reality, there are a lot of variables outside of the quarterback's control. And we've run through those things before on this podcast, but I think Sam Darnold is the greatest proof of that. To see what this guy has looked like in other stops where the coaching's not been there and the offensive line has not been there. You know, suddenly a quarterback who looked completely lost, by his own words, is getting ready to tackle the biggest stage in sports. So if Sam Darnold can do that, it makes you think, well, what the heck was happening before? And you know, it's funny, in the aftermath of Sunday's game and his performance in that game, it became almost like this conversation online about who's to blame. Like, what organization did Sam wrong the most, right? And the list immediately comes up about the Jets or the Carolina Panthers, who the Jets traded Sam Darnold to, or the Vikings were certainly thrown in there. I did not see any mentions about the 49ers, but I'm sure if you dive deep into Twitter, you'll find some people blaming them as well. And here's where I think the conversation needs to slow down a little bit, because not all those situations I don't think they all belong in the same bucket. And lumping them all in together is just lazy. And one of the big ones that got mentioned a ton, I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever. So the one that got mentioned the most I saw was the Vikings, right? And I think you can remove the Vikings from the list right away. Because if you have Minnesota in that conversation, the Vikings did not, I know everybody, they gave up on Sam Darnold. Saying they gave up on Sam Darnold is simply not accurate. What people are forgetting, or maybe just choosing to ignore, the Vikings had already drafted J.J. McCarthy before Sam Darnold ever took a snap for them, right? They had traded up in the first round, I think multiple times, but they certainly traded up to 10. That is a franchise investment of their quarterback. Now, McCarthy went out in training camp and injured his knee, wasn't able to play that entire season, so that opened the door for Sam to get the opportunity that he did in Minnesota. But this was never a referendum on whether the Vikings believed in Sam Darnold. They had already drafted their future quarterback the year that they also brought in Sam Darnold. And here's another key part that people conveniently leave out. Minnesota did make an offer to Darnold to remain in Minnesota, and it was similar to the one basically that he got in Seattle. So it was essentially a one-year deal. That's what Seattle basically offered him as well. The overall numbers look gaudy, but it was essentially a one-year deal that if things did not work out this year, they would have been able to get out of that in 2026. So for all the people who are blaming the Vikings, how could they turn their back on Sam Darnold? Were the Vikings supposed to hand Sam Darnold a long-term contract when the quarterback they drafted 10th overall had never played, and they were basically just going to burn that pick, right? You're going to, if you're handing Darnold a long-term contract, that's what you're saying. That's not how it works in the NFL. That's not how teams operate. And that's not just a thing specific to the Vikings. That's how any team would do it. So, and look, at the end of the day, Sam was a free agent. So if he had re-signed with Minnesota and been the starter, the clock was already ticking on him there, right? Like if he had been the starter and re-signed with Minnesota and they did offer him a contract, the first game that he played poorly, the first bad interception he threw, what do you think was going to happen? The chance for J.J. McCarthy would have started almost immediately. So that pressure, if he had remained in Minnesota, was kind of unavoidable. And that did not exist in Seattle. He was getting a clean slate in Seattle. And again, remember, he was a free agent. They didn't trade him to Seattle. He had say in where he was going to go. So the Vikings, to me, don't belong in this conversation at all. If anything, they're a reminder that situation matters. Now, did they, if you want to say they screwed up by drafting J.J. McCarthy, based on what we're seeing right now, yeah, probably. But isn't that the lesson we're just saying we're learning from the situation? Like sometimes it takes a little while. Progress is not linear. But if you want to argue about J.J. McCarthy shouldn't have been drafted, well, that's a different argument. They had already done that by the time they got to see Sam play. So look, credit to the Seahawks because they saw what he did in Minnesota last year. And I think some people, myself included, thought that that was a product more of the Minnesota system than it was really anything that Sam Darnold had changed about his play because he was surrounded with the great weapons and great coaching and all that type of stuff. But also, Seattle gave him something really he had not had for a while, which was a clean spot, right? Like he was the starting quarterback coming in right away. And it gave him, I think it gives you confidence, right? Like confidence is not built in all the nonsense stuff. It's built in doing the work. So Seattle did not treat him really like a temporary solution. They handed him the starting quarterback job, and they treated him like their starting quarterback. And what do you know? The guy played like one. He played fantastic really all season. And credit to the Seahawks for seeing that and needing a quarterback and making that move. They get the rewards. Other teams that, gave up on Sam, at least get the Niners is one. But that doesn't really make much sense because they didn't need him. He only played one game for him. He was insurance there, right? And if they needed to break glass in case of emergency, I guess he did play one game, but he was like a break glass in case of emergency quarterback. And to be fair, being around that organization and being around Kyle Shanahan probably helped in his growth, right? Like he picked up these things along the way. But he was never going to play there because they already had Brock Purdy. So unless there was some sort of devastating injury, that was not where he was going to succeed. Now, the two that people can blame, I think, fairly, one, Carolina. And Carolina, when they got Sam and traded for Sam, they had traded a second-round pick for a quarterback who they were trying to get him to be the best version of himself. But it was a bad situation, right? Like, he was not supported there the way you needed to. And when it didn't work out, because they traded, I think, a second and a fifth, they moved on. And that's not really shocking. He did not play well there. Now, was it all his fault? No. It was a bad situation, bad coaching. Matt Rule was there at the time. It was a bit of a mess. And look, I will say this for Carolina. While they screwed up in the development of Sam Darnold in the short time they had him, maybe they learned some lessons when it came to Bryce Young, right? Like that first year with Bryce Young was a disaster. They go out and get Canales to come in there and be the head coach, and it has certainly improved things. Now, I get it. There was different compensation. He was the number one overall pick. Sam, they traded a couple of draft picks for, but maybe they learned something from having Sam Darnold. But of course, the team that has to get the bulk of the blame for why things went wrong with Sam Darnold early in his career is obviously the Jets. And what people I think are missing is there was no version of reality where Sam Darnold would ever be this for the Jets. You can spin it however you want. Injuries or coaching or the GM moves, the roster that they put together. The truth is, it's a lot, I think a lot simpler than that. The Jets did not know how to build around a franchise quarterback. They didn't do a good job of protecting him or supporting him. And it was a mess of a situation, right? Like they didn't develop him. And the part that really stands out, and I think that the one that Jet fans know but don't want to hear, they were thrilled when he left. This idea now that, we didn't want Sam, that's nonsense. Who were the ones that were cheering for Zach Wilson when he was drafted? Or cheering when Sam Darnold was traded away? Who was the ones that were saying, it's time, we got to move on? Stop pretending now because it turned out well for him. This revisionist history that Jet fans always believed in Sam is nonsense. And look, I get that the Jets and Joe Douglas kind of were in a bit of a tough situation because Sam had not played well those first 3 years, and the clock is ticking right on the rookie deal. You're going to extend him with a long-term contract. And there was nobody who was willing to give Sam that long-term contract, right? So to believe that the Jets simply, it was just about putting more talent around them, that misses all the stops along the way and all the things that Sam learned along the way playing for better organizations. So, that part matters. And look, Joe Douglas, to me, did the best thing he could do for Sam Darnold's long-term success in the NFL. He traded him away from the Jets. So, look, the irony of this is the reason the Jets will still be the team that people focus on with Sam is because they were the team that drafted him and brought him into the league, and nowhere did he look worse for longer than with the Jets. And the Jets are still in the same position now. They're in a mess. Whoever the Jets draft next, if it's this year, if it's in 2027, does anyone actually believe that they will do a better job based on what happened with Sam or with Zach Wilson, that they'll do a better job of developing the next guy than they did for the last guy? Be honest. And I know that a lot of Jet fans, most Jet fans that I've heard from, are rooting for Sam, not just because they want to beat the Patriots. The Patriots winning is the worst thing ever. But that's not the realization that Sam was the answer. That's the sports equivalent of someone who escapes prison and thinks, good for that guy for escaping, even though we're still sitting here. Sam Darnold is basically Andy Dufresne escaping Shawshank. And the Jet fans, they're the rest of the prisoners. Remember that scene after Andy escapes? They're sitting around telling stories about him during lunch. That's Jet fans. They're happy that he was able to make it out while they're still dealing with the situation that they have to deal with and the quarterback situation where the Jets have never been further away from finding their franchise quarterback. Now, Jet fans will try to spin it anyway. Oh, well, blame this team. This team screwed it up too. No one screwed it up more than the Jets did. So Sam Darnold didn't just magically become good. He was allowed to become good, and he was given the things in other organizations that he was not given in earlier stops in his career. And those other stops are part of why he is where he is now. If he had stayed with the Jets, this is not the guy you would have gotten. If he would have stayed with the Panthers, this is not the guy you would have gotten. So it's proof that progress is not linear and that failure, real, public, ugly failure, sometimes doesn't have to be the end of the story. So that's a fantastic thing to see, and I think a lot of people are rooting for Sam Darnold to win the Super Bowl. And one final thought, Sam Darnold making the Super Bowl, it's a very inspiring story. And I'm sure you'll see, if he wins the Super Bowl, I'm sure you'll see a lot of tweets about people saying, we always knew that this was going to happen. We always believed in Sam. I would just say, look at the date on those tweets. Nobody's retweeting from 4 years ago. Nobody's retweeting from 3 years ago. Nobody's retweeting from when he got traded by the Jets or cut by the Panthers or any of that. It's all made up. This was not success is not guaranteed. And Sam Darnold proves it was not overnight. So an inspiring story. I'm sure NFL teams will be desperate for quarterbacks. Will be trying to learn this story. And I'm sure this offseason, people will be floating the idea of some other quarterback that's bounced around the league. Maybe this guy can be the next Sam Darnold. So certainly Sam Darnold's story is an inspiring one and one to watch for Super Bowl 60. Okay, so I don't know if anybody else noticed this from this weekend, but during the AFC Championship game between the Broncos and the Patriots, in that second half, when the weather was really whipping up, there was this conversation online between football fans. It was basically kind of like a bit of a civil war. On the one side, you had the group that was loving the fact that the football was being played in the elements, being played in the snow and the cold and the wind. That's real football weather. They love it. And then the other half basically admitted, it looks good on TV, but in terms of the actual product, it's kind of ugly, right? Like the 30-mile-an-hour winds and neither team being able to move the ball. And that group, they basically want, clean conditions, right? They want clean footing and clean throws and clean outcomes and everything else. And basically, they would prefer the game to be played in the dome where the elements are not part of the story. They want it to be decided by the teams that are playing the game and not by a gust of wind blowing a field goal, right? Or, all that kind of stuff. And look, for the traditionalists, I can kind of see it both ways. I like a little bit of snow, and sometimes snow leads to more offense. So I don't mind a low-scoring game. I don't care if it's a high-scoring game, but I want it to be played on a high level, and it really didn't feel like that was the case on Sunday. Now, I would say to the NFL traditionalists, that second group that likes the football inside, you're going to be getting more of that. And it really has very little. Now, it might take a while, but it has very little to do with the purity of the fans or anything like that. It's got to do with money. The NFL, at the end of the day, it's not a sport first, it's a business first, and a ruthlessly efficient business at that. So if you want to understand why dome stadiums are probably going to be the norm in the future, just follow the conversations about the revenue streams, right? And NFL owners, as more and more stadiums get proposed around the country, they're going to be looking to have it indoors because you can have more events, right? You can have more sporting events and college football and WrestleManias and all that type of stuff. You don't get to have that in January in the Northeast or in cold weather climates. Hosting a Super Bowl, they get to do that, right? That basically is one of the conditions. If you're in a cold place, you have to have a dome stadium. And if you want that to be a possibility when you're building your stadium, which NFL owners certainly do, that will have to be a factor. And they want year-round use, right? Like as great as Lambeau is or Buffalo is, a dome stadium is a printing press of money basically year-round. So, and also I think the premium seating and all that type of stuff, you can charge more if people know it's not just appealing to the die-hard football fan, right? Like corporate sponsors, I don't know if they want to be sitting outside in a snowstorm. And I think TV also enjoys that more, right? Like it's a predictable product. There's no weather delays. There's no sloppy fields. And at the end of the day, the NFL is about making money, as I said. So the networks like the indoor aspect, I think. And I think the advertisers like. And the owners like both of those. So, yeah, the NFL is going to continue to lean into domes, not because snow is bad for football, but because snow is bad for business. And at the end of the day, that is what the NFL owners are looking to do, right? Owners will make it out like they're doing this for fans. Like you watch when they build new stadiums. Well, we're building it inside so the fans feel comfortable. And nonsense. That has nothing to do with it. And really, football fans who go to games are a different breed. And if you held a poll of those people that live in those cold weather climates, you want to go outside or you want it to be a dome, they'll all pick outside. They love being outside. So I would say, look, football in the elements is not going anywhere because, as I mentioned, Lambeau Field is not going there. Buffalo just built a new stadium that opens next season. It's outdoors, even though they did try to build it so that the wind is not so much of a factor for the games being played. And Robert Kraft, the Patriots owner, has said that he wants his teams always to play outside. He loves that home field advantage. But the owners who kind of control the league, they're always looking for the next revenue stream, right? Like if they make $10 million one year and $9 million the following year, they don't look at it as making $19 million over 2 years. They look at it as losing $1 million. So they're always looking for the next revenue stream. And snow games, they will survive, but domed football in the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be much more of a factor. So if you love those outdoor snow games, get them while you can, because chances are there's going to be fewer of them in the future.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
Okay, finally, we just got done with college football. Now let's focus a little bit on college basketball, because if you needed any further proof of just how broken college sports have become, forget about the NIL or forget about the transfer portal or anything like that. You just need to know one name. And that name is Charles Bediako. Now, you might be saying to yourself, who the heck is Charles Bediako? Charles Bediako is a 23-year-old former G League player in the NBA who a judge last week allowed to rejoin the Alabama college basketball program. And if that sentence doesn't tell you just how screwed up college sports has become, I don't know really what the next step is. Because this is to give you the short version of a long, complicated story. Charles Bediako played for Alabama, played there for a couple of seasons. I think 2023, he decides he's going to enter the NBA draft. Stays in the draft through the withdrawal window, right? Like sometimes guys can decide against going into the draft. He stays in. Doesn't get drafted, but he does sign with like NBA-related contracts, plays in the G League for several years. And under NCAA rules, which really shouldn't even need to be written down, it would seem pretty obvious, right? Like you sign contracts with NBA teams, you play in professional leagues, you're not allowed to go back. Your college eligibility is now done. And that rule has existed forever. Everybody kind of knows that. It's pretty basic, right? Like if you play in a professional league, you are not allowed to come back to college. Seems simple, right? Last week, an Alabama judge issued a temporary restraining order that allowed Bediako to again immediately begin playing and regain his eligibility for the Crimson Tide. So not midseason, not after this year, not we'll see down the road or sit on the sidelines while we decide this. No. And on Saturday, he played 25 minutes, scored 13 points, blocked a couple of shots, had a couple of putback dunks. He looked great, like he never left. After all, he's 23 years old. He should look great. So just like that, the NCAA's eligibility was overridden by a local court. Now, the original order was supposed to last for 10 days and then expire, and then the judge has extended it another 10 days because of weather delays. So what that temporary restraining order means, it's not for Bediako, it's for the NCAA. So he gets to keep playing, which is kind of wild. And this is not, sometimes there are gray area cases. This is not one of those. This is not a guy who entered the draft and then decided, no, I'm going to go back to school. This is not, he played overseas as a teenager or something like that. This guy the rules are simple, and he violated the rules. He stayed in the draft beyond the deadline, didn't get drafted, but signed multiple NBA contracts. He played professionally for almost 3 years, was under contract with an NBA organization, and now he is back playing in college. The NCAA they made it crystal clear. Again, like it really shouldn't even need to be written down. You're not eligible for college basketball once you turn pro. So it's kind of wild that this is going on and that this is a window into the future. Because like if this guy has been able to do it with his lawyers, it tells you what is going to be the case. And it feels like college sports is already pro sports, but generally not with pro athletes. And that is a real problem because what it shows you is that the rule book doesn't matter. If you don't like something, just take it to court. Just sue. And now, the judge who issued the temporary restraining order, as if this was not bad enough and looked bad enough, the guy who issued the temporary restraining order, he's not some neutral, detached observer with no connection to the program. Shockingly enough, he and his wife are documented donors to the Alabama athletics program, and they are listed on the Crimson Tide website with lifetime contributions between $100,000 and $249,000. So this is not, a casual booster who buys a couple of season tickets every single year. This is people with real money tied directly to the athletic department. Now, look, nobody's accusing anybody of any wrongdoing or doing anything illegal. But can we have any level of credibility here? Like it feels like I doesn't even feel like it's hanging by a thread. But if it's anything, it's hanging by a thread, because when you have an Alabama donor who's a judge who can override the NCAA, you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to start raising an eyebrow of what the heck is going on here. Now, these cases have popped up other places, and judges generally, they recuse themselves if they have any type of conflict. This one, he stayed on the case and basically allowed this guy to get back on the court while we await the ruling on the case. So you might be saying to yourself, why would a judge ever allow that? And let's take out the part that he's just looking to benefit the program that he roots for, which seems like the Occam's razor, right? The most obvious answer is the correct one. The temporary restraining order basically said that his case, Bediako's case, showed enough legal grounds to argue that the NCAA's eligibility rules were unlawfully restricting him and causing immediate and irreparable harm to his career. In these cases, a judge isn't ruling that the player is right. He's ruling that the harm of not allowing him to play outweighs the harm of forcing him to the sidelines while the case is pending. So the case is still making its way through the court. Shockingly, maybe it'll be delayed until the season's over. But his legal team, Bediako's legal team, basically their core arguments were that the NCAA's draft withdrawal window is basically like a restraint of trade. And the fact that he failed to stick in the NBA and now he's basically prevented from playing anywhere but the G League limits his options. Again, it's college basketball. You have to be a college player. Also, they argue that the rules inconsistently enforced and that the players on international teams, they don't have to follow these same kind of rules, so that there's some wiggle room there. And the NCAA picks when people have professional status. Also, the harm in allowing him to play outweighs the harm of forcing him to sit down, right? Like if he loses this time of playing games, he'll never be able to make that up, even if he wins his case 2-3 years down the road. I don't know how much those legal arguments really stand, but what convinced the judge to step in temporarily is those arguments. Now, in fairness, the judge did not rule the case. He did not rule that Bediako is eligible to play under NCAA rules, at least not yet. The case, again, is still pending. He also did not rule that the NCAA rules are illegal. At least that's nice for now. And he did not settle the case, at least not yet. But what he did say was while the lawsuit plays out, the NCAA cannot enforce its eligibility rule against this player. So the NCAA takes, a back seat to this court judge. And why this is so damaging, the NCAA, I know people had problems with the NCAA before. Like this was their last real enforcement lever, right? They can't stop NIL. They can't stop transfers. They can't really do much of anything anymore. And this was their one last hammer where they could, hold the line on who was eligible to play and who's not. And once judges start throwing out temporary restraining orders that bypass eligibility rules, again, mid-season, the NCAA, what power do they have? Basically, they're like a suggestion box at this point. They have no authority to be able to enforce even the most basic rule. So this is why a lot of college basketball coaches, John Calipari was furious about this the other day, because if this stands, then what's the rule anymore? Can a player go and play in the NBA and come back and play in college? Can you sign NBA contracts but yet continue to have your college eligibility? If you're playing in the G League right now, can you be signed up for a March Madness run? If things don't work out in the G League, you can go back to college and kind of dominate there. It's wild. And the answer depends, I guess, on which judge you find along the way. And that's where we are now. So the NCAA looks absolutely powerless. And the rule book, it seems like it's a kind of optional. Is it written in pencil? It may as well be. And the funniest part about this is even the coach of Alabama knows that this is ridiculous. Nate Oates came out and said, look, the system's broken. But typical college basketball coach speak, he admitted that, but then he's also going to take advantage of it. And his logic was, if the court says that Bediako could play, why wouldn't I play him? Because, again, there are no standards and there are no rules, and it's win at all costs, and that's all that matters. So, look, at the end of the day, Charles Bediako is the poster child for this, but this is really about the erosion of any rule of law in college sports. Because when eligibility, even eligibility, is being ruled by a court and a judge rather than the NCAA, it kind of proves to you that the latest step is that the madness does not necessarily start in March anymore in college basketball. It's madness all year round. All right, that is going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've not done it already, please hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you are taking the podcast in on. It really does help us grow long term. So we will be back later this week with another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.